The Arctic, still a mystery at the beginning of the 20th century. Could there be undiscovered land under the ice, a terra incognita? Reaching the North Pole was a real challenge. Many expeditions set out, risking their lives to be the first there, but none succeeded. Then, in 1926, it all changed. Explorers took to the air. The first person to reach the pole was Norwegian Roald Amundsen. His airship took just 17 hours. In 1931, another adventurer takes up the challenge. He wants to get to the North Pole in a submarine, under the ice. Hubert Wilkins, an Australian polar explorer, will write history and then be forgotten. Until now, when modern explorers follow his footsteps, they're determined to find out why so little is known about Wilkins' legendary expedition and what happened to him and his submarine. Hubert Wilkins, 13th child of an English sheep farmer, was raised in the wilds of South Australia. His first job, kangaroo hunter. Outdoor life in this parched land teaches him about the sun, wind and clouds. It also gives him a lifelong quest to understand how weather and climate work. He has other skills too, many self-taught. Pilot, photographer, cameraman, reporter. But his real passion is exploration, and this takes him all over the world. In 1928, Wilkins sets out on an epic journey, the first trans-Arctic flight. It's more than 3,200 kilometers from Alaska to the northern edge of Europe. As he flies over the icy waste, he collects data which will help explain global weather fluctuations. His goal, Spitsbergen. "20 hours flying in a single-engined plane. It's a worldwide sensation." This pioneering flight earns him fame and glory, and a knighthood from King George V. From now on, he's Sir Hubert. New York gives him a rousing Fifth Avenue welcome. During the celebrations, he meets Suzanne Bennett, a fellow Australian. She's a singer and actress, searching for fame on Broadway. A few weeks later, they get engaged. Suzanne soon realizes that she's marrying a restless explorer, a true adventurer. For her husband is once again planning an expedition to the North Pole, not by air, but by submarine, under the ice. He rents a redundant World War I submarine from the US Navy for just $1 a year, and equips it as a laboratory for Arctic research. His scientific goal? Collecting data to improve Europe's weather forecasts.
If we can demonstrate that a submarine is useful in traveling underneath the Arctic ice, I believe it may also prove useful in times for national defense and for the development of commercial possibilities along the Arctic coast of the United States and Canada.
In 1929, newspaper mogul Randolph Hearst offers Sir Hubert a round-the-world flight aboard the airship Graf Zeppelin. During this flight, Wilkins thinks of an idea that could attract financial sponsors for his planned expedition. The submarine and the Zeppelin should meet at the North Pole. Hearst is thrilled and promises $250,000, provided the rendezvous actually happens. Wilkins' plan makes headlines worldwide. Walt Disney, too, is fired with enthusiasm. He sends Sir Hubert a personal Mickey Mouse card with best wishes for the expedition's success. Hubert Wilkins is on board his submarine as she heads for her naming ceremony. Over 800 enthusiastic onlookers welcome them to the port of Brooklyn. Guest of honor is Jean-Jules Verne, grandson of the famous French novelist. The French national anthem is played. Prohibition forbids alcohol. Lady Wilkins must christen the boat with ice cubes. Ship, I name you Nautilus. Go on your wonderful adventure. In your heart is great treasure. Bring that treasure safely back to me. She's called Nautilus, after the legendary submarine in Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Wilkins fixes a bronze plaque to the hull. On it is Captain Nemo's motto, Mobilis in mobili, moving amidst movement. I find it remarkable that Wilkins was inspired by 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, written by Jules Verne, an author dear to the French. It combined Wilkins' dreams with his ambition to do scientific research. He's just like the heroes of 20,000 Leagues, sharing their desire to collect data and make a contribution to science. Sir Hubert borrows another idea from Jules Verne. He converts the submarine's torpedo room into an airlock. As air is pumped in and the pressure increases, the researchers' ears begin to ache. They try to equalize. When the air pressure inside is greater than the water pressure outside, they open the hatch. For the first time ever, scientists have direct access to the deep ocean. Now they can take samples from the depths. Just like Captain Nemo, Sir Hubert wishes to explore and conquer the polar seas. His theory is that the Arctic drives Europe's weather. On his submarine expedition, he wants to prove that the Arctic Ocean plays a key role in global weather patterns and determines our climate. He hopes his research will make long-term forecasts possible. During the fitting out, Wilkins relies on his shipwright's expertise, but none of them has experience of such extreme conditions, since no one had ever taken a submarine to the Arctic. The plan is to build a wooden superstructure with skids, so the boat can slide along the undersurface of the ice. In case of collision with an iceberg, at the bow, they build a shock absorber. Wilkins also thinks of other possible emergencies. He's afraid of being trapped under the sea ice, so he designs a special ice borer to cut an escape hole to the surface. They test it on land. The drill should bore a hole through this ice block, but it sticks, and the designer has to help with a hammer. Despite this, Wilkins makes no improvements to the drill. The clock is ticking, and he wants to start his expedition during good weather. Another new feature is this special hydraulic flap. Its job is to keep the submarine a safe distance below the ice. Nautilus is now a unique and unusual underwater craft. But is it fit for Arctic exploration? Nobody yet knows.
You will have to judge it from its time. And judged from that time, it was that was in some way high technology. You had never before done a drilling of the ice from beneath, and you had never had a ram with this purpose to protect the U-boat from the icebergs. So that was quite new.
Nautilus undergoes her sea trials, including a test dive. Almost immediately, there's a problem. Nautilus, out of control, dives below her 200-foot maximum depth.
Discover the past with exclusive history documentaries and ad-free podcasts presented by world-renowned historians, all from History Hit. Watch them on your smart TV or on the go with your mobile device. Download the app now to explore everything, from the wonders of ancient Pompeii and the mystery of the princes in the tower to the life of Anne Boleyn and D-Day. Sign up via the link in the description.
Captain Danenhauer immediately checks his boat. Can she withstand the water pressure? A major leak would send them all to a watery grave. Fortunately, luck is on their side. A catastrophe has been avoided. But Nautilus still needs repairs, and their departure for the North Pole must be delayed. Newspapers begin to criticize Wilkins and his risky venture.
Of course, the constraints of having to use an old and fairly unsafe submarine was due to money constraints. He could have achieved a lot more in total safety if he had plenty of funds to build his own submarine. So the criticism was somehow right.
Wilkins defends his plan in a 350-page book, Under the North Pole. This documents his adventure in detail, before he even sets out. Sir Hubert sees his book as a source of income and as a testament for future generations. But if we fail, I want to leave behind a record of our preparations and proposals to help that someone who will someday make a trans-Arctic journey beneath the ice successfully. Nautilus and her crew of 20 leave New York. They're facing a voyage of more than 10,000 kilometers. Time is short. In just 2 months, the Arctic autumn storms will begin. Even if all goes well, it will take them at least 4 weeks to reach the North Pole. Lady Wilkins waves a final farewell. Later, she will complain that she's the world's loneliest wife. The first stage is an Atlantic crossing to England and then on to Norway, 6,500 kilometers of ocean. A week after setting out, Nautilus is hit by a violent storm. She's tossed around like a toy, rolling up to 100 degrees. The engines fail, and most of the crew are seasick. They try to repair the engines, in vain. Adrift in mid-Atlantic, the Nautilus sends an SOS. It's just 19 years since the Titanic sent the same signal. The crew is scared. Their elderly submarine is supposed to take them to the pole and back, but now they realize she's in poor shape. By luck, a warship, USS Wyoming, is nearby. She hears the distress call and steams to Nautilus's aid. For hours, they attempt to get a line to the submarine. Finally, as the storm dies down, they succeed. An officer from the Wyoming offers Captain Danenhauer a tow to England. They'll also supply Sir Hubert and his crew with welcome fresh vegetables, cigarettes, and newspapers. The crossing continues under tow. The crew is now divided. Some are determined to continue the expedition to the North Pole. Others want to disembark as soon as they reach the next port. After 23 days, Nautilus finally reaches Plymouth in southwest England. She must, yet again, be repaired. Once more, the team loses valuable time. Wilkins is worried they won't be able to reach the pole before Arctic winter sets in. The omens aren't good. Repairs in dry dock take over a month, and the expedition is still almost 5,000 kilometers from its goal. While the men kick their heels, Sir Hubert welcomes a very important visitor, Edward, Prince of Wales. 5 years later, the prince will become King Edward VIII. Wilkins has known him since the end of the First World War, and they both share a passion for technology and flying. At last, the dock is flooded. Sir Hubert is impatient. Every hour counts as the shorter days and autumn storms draw nearer. The 4-day voyage from England to Norway goes without a hitch. In Bergen, the crew makes final preparations for the trip under the ice. New supplies and scientific instruments are loaded. More researchers join the crew. Bernhard Fillinger from Freiburg, Germany, and Norwegian Harald Sverdrup, acknowledged as the leading oceanographer of his time. Then, a final check of the Nautilus's seaworthiness.
Our chief of the Norwegian Submarine Service, Captain Tank Nilsen, was kindly asked if he could come on board the Nautilus and do an inspection and tell about his findings and what he thought about the design itself. And when he came up again, he told Mr. Sverdrup that I will never have sent my crews on board this submarine.
The whole of Bergen is wondering if the crew will ever return alive. Wilkins receives a telegram from his sponsor, Randolph Hearst, asking him to cancel the expedition. He should try again next year with a more modern submarine. But Sir Hubert is undeterred. They reach Spitsbergen, still more than 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. For the first time, Nautilus meets drift ice. Inside the hull, it's freezing cold. Despite this, Wilkins and his researchers start their work. Harold Sverdrup's particular interest is to find out if the Earth is a perfect sphere. To do this, he uses a special pendulum. Gravity varies from place to place. The smaller the distance from the Earth's center, the greater the force of gravity, and the faster the pendulum swings. Sure enough, close to the pole, the pendulum swings considerably faster than at the equator. It's thanks to Nautilus's pioneering work that we know today Earth is flattened at the poles. These measurements have major historical significance. They were the first ones taken at sea. We knew a lot about gravity on land, but at sea we had no knowledge at all. The nearer Wilkins and his crew get to the pole, the more unbearable conditions on board become. The temperature is below freezing. Everyone must keep moving to stop their arms and legs stiffening up. Inside Nautilus, there's frozen condensation everywhere. The boat has no heating, and the water pipes are close to freezing. All the crew can do is tough it out. There's almost no insulation in the hull. It's like living in a freezing cigar tube.
It is no wonder that the men eventually began to fear for their very lives. With all of the problems that this submarine had encountered with breakdowns, imagine suddenly having to face the possibility of actually diving under the Arctic ice pack. Imagine thinking that you would spend a month under there. Imagine thinking that you would never survive. Where were you going to get the air from? Were the drills going to fail?
Despite the appalling conditions, Wilkins and his team carry on with their research. Day and night they work in the pressure chamber. They want to find out what creatures can live in the icy depths and use a plankton net to catch specimens. Everyone is amazed by the jellyfish, like this one with its graceful movements. Wilkins writes in his diary, "The jellyfish were the only things which seemed to drift by unconcernedly, some of them looking like miniature airships in a milky sky." Jules Verne's Captain Nemo was also amazed by the jellyfish.
did valuable scientific work for the very first time in the Arctic region, and importantly showed that science could be done from a submarine operating in that icy wasteland of the Arctic Ocean.
However, science alone is not going to make the headlines. Randolph Hearst and his newspapers are waiting for the sensational moment when Nautilus makes her first dive under the ice. Sir Hubert writes in his private diary, "Without exception, the others in the vessel wanted to immediately turn back. To do so would be to admit complete failure." Wilkins gives the command, "Prepare to dive." A diver does a final inspection of the submarine's hull and rudders. Everything is checked to reduce the risk of an accident under the ice. If anything goes wrong, they might not get out alive. It's bad news. A vital part of the steering system is missing. The two horizontal diving rudders have disappeared. Without them, Nautilus is unfit to dive. How could this have happened? Was the damage caused by hitting ice floes? A submarine voyage in the Arctic is very risky, and the consequences unforeseeable. A rumor circulates among the crew. It's sabotage. Perhaps fearing the dive under the ice would prove fatal, one of the engineers damaged the hydroplanes on purpose.
The men would do anything, I believe, in order to end the mission. They had had enough. The ice inside the submarine, everything soaking wet. No, they had to somehow end it.
On the 28th of August 1931, Nautilus reaches the edge of the pack ice at 82 degrees north. They are still 800 kilometers from the pole. Despite the missing hydroplanes, Sir Hubert is determined to continue his mission, to show the world that a submarine can dive under the ice and reach the North Pole. This is the first day since we discovered the loss of the diving rudders that we have had calm water, and I was determined that the ship would go under the ice. The forward ballast tanks are flooded. Nautilus's bow sinks low in the water. Then Captain Danenhauer orders full speed ahead and rams the submarine under the ice. Later, Wilkins wrote, "The noise of the ice scraping along the top of the vessel was terrifying. It sounded as though the whole superstructure was being demolished." At last, the historic moment. Sir Hubert and his crew are under the Arctic ice cap, the first people ever to do this. They discover that it's much lighter under the ice than anyone had imagined. But the risky dive has damaged the radio aerial. From now on, Nautilus is cut off from the rest of the world. The radio operator tries to contact Randolph Hearst in New York, but it's no use. Even sending an SOS is impossible.
It's actually a very good point that Roald Amundsen made, which was, if you are going on a polar expedition, don't have any means of communication. Because if you then don't communicate, then people start getting worried.
Back in the US, rumors fly. The submarine has disappeared. The crew is dead. The Washington Post is first to print. Now Wilkins has another problem. He needs proof that Nautilus has actually gone under the ice. Once more, he gives the order to dive. This time, he and his cameraman film from an ice floe to provide firm evidence. Again and again, the captain rams Nautilus under the ice, but only submerges a few meters. Eventually, Sir Hubert has enough shots and stops filming. But he is afraid that just diving under the ice won't be enough to get his expedition on newspaper front pages. However, he and his crew can finally stretch their legs. A great pleasure after almost 4 weeks cooped up in a cold, wet submarine. To find Nautilus's exact position, they take a fix on the sun, just as Captain Nemo did for his Nautilus. Fortunately, there are no clouds. If they can't see the sun, they can't calculate their latitude and longitude. Meanwhile, Sir Hubert and the radio man rig a temporary aerial. It works, and they send a short signal that all is well. Soon they receive a reply from Randolph Hearst, the expedition's backer in New York. Dear Sir Hubert, I am exceedingly happy to hear good news from you, but I feel continued concern about the welfare of yourself and your crew. I most urgently beg you to return promptly. The message also tells them that the planned rendezvous with the Zeppelin at the North Pole is cancelled, and Hearst is stopping all further funding. For Wilkins, this is a bitter blow. He's invested around $100,000, almost all his personal fortune, in the expedition. Now he could face bankruptcy. Sir Hubert and Harold Sverdrup, the oceanographer, decide there's only one way to salvage the expedition's reputation: concentrate on the science. Using a device called a Nansen bottle, they measure temperature and salinity deep below the surface of the Arctic Ocean. A weight is dropped down the line. Far below, it hits the Nansen bottle and turns it upside down, closing it tight. Now, no water can get in or out.
Nautilus
made a very important discovery, that there's a branch of the Gulf Stream which reaches far up into the Arctic. The salinity and temperature readings prove the existence of this branch, since the Gulf Stream is associated with A, higher salinity, and B, fairly obviously, higher water temperature. It's the Gulf Stream that is responsible for Europe's mild climate. The rhododendron, a subtropical plant from Asia, can flourish in the mountains of Norway. Wilkins' measurements showed a relatively high salt content deep in the Arctic Ocean. This is chilled seawater from the salt-rich Gulf Stream, which flows from the warm south to the cold north, part of the worldwide system of ocean currents which drives our climate. We now know that the polar regions, particularly the Arctic, are key to understanding what drives the climate change we are experiencing. Wilkins' Nautilus expedition gives us data from high latitudes back to 1931 and includes readings from the surface right down to 3,000 meters. This information is priceless. After 3 weeks surrounded by ice, Wilkins abandons his dream. Nautilus sets course for Norway. However, the sea between the edge of the pack ice and Spitsbergen is notorious for bad weather. Once again, the submarine is hit by a severe storm. And once again, many of the crew are seasick. Finally, on the 20th of September, Nautilus makes it back to Bergen. The crowd can hardly believe that the crew has returned alive. But another engine failure means the elderly submarine will voyage no further. The US Navy, who still own the boat, give the order to sink her off the Norwegian coast. A fjord near Bergen will be Nautilus's last resting place. The radio operator sends a final message. Goodbye, Nautilus, with all your discomforts. There will always be a warm spot in the heart of your radio man for the first submarine to penetrate the Arctic ice. Wilkins is already back in America, his dream of reaching the North Pole unfulfilled. The crew watch Nautilus make her last dive. Ever since Sir Hubert had to cut his expedition short, people have asked why. Was the steering gear damaged by ice, or was it really sabotage? It took the Second World War to make Wilkins' dream of long-term weather forecasting possible. Both sides set up extensive networks of Arctic observation stations, a milestone for meteorology. During the 1950s, there's another development, an important one for Wilkins' dream. The United States builds the world's first nuclear-powered submarine. It's a giant, 100 meters long and over 3,000 tons, 5 times larger than Wilkins' boat. Mamie Eisenhower, America's First Lady, launches the new submarine, again named Nautilus. Prohibition is long over, so this time it's champagne, not ice cubes. The launch marks a major advance in submarine technology. At last, Sir Hubert's wish can be fulfilled. It's now possible to dive long distances under ice. The nuclear power plant makes life on board very comfortable. Air conditioning, freezers full of supplies, and much more room. Nothing like the old Nautilus. Then, the Soviet Union launches the world's first satellite, Sputnik 1. the Americans have lost the first leg of the space race. To divert public attention from this Cold War defeat, Nautilus is sent on a top-secret mission, Operation Sunshine. Few people are told her route. Following Sir Hubert's example, she sets course for the Arctic and makes the first ever dive beneath the North Pole, more than 3,000 kilometers under the pack ice. Shortly after this, she beats the target of 20,000 leagues set by Jules Verne's novel. On her return to New York, USS Nautilus gets a warm welcome. But Sir Hubert is not among the guests. His pioneering journey is long forgotten. Although he failed to reach the North Pole, it was his expedition that proved submarines could dive safely under the polar ice cap. For almost 80 years, his Nautilus has been lying undisturbed at the bottom of the Byfjord, just a few kilometers from Bergen. Now, scientists in a modern submersible are determined to find out why Wilkins' legendary expedition had to be aborted. Can they find evidence of sabotage? Over the years, Sir Hubert's reputation has grown. He's now acknowledged as one of the 20th century's greatest polar explorers, and his submarine expedition is an important part of scientific history. Nautilus ought to be declared a Norwegian national marine monument. This two-man submersible is depth-rated to 400 meters. It's powered by electric motors, and in emergency can stay underwater for up to a week. The water is murky. Light fades quickly in the first few meters. Two parallel laser beams allow the crew to measure objects underwater.
The Eagle has landed.
After 30 minutes, the submarine lands on the bed of the fjord. On the surface, a mothership monitors the dive.
346 meters. Okay.
The submersible uses its sonar to try and locate Wilkins' submarine. Then, at 340 meters, the crew spots a target on the sonar. It's the Nautilus.
Okay, wir stehen davor. Wir haben die Nautilus gefunden.
Okay, Jürgen, fantastic. Félicitations.
These skids allowed Nautilus to slide under the ice. A hatch, Sir Hubert's door to the freezing Arctic waste. Now the hull is a paradise for shrimp. An anglerfish guards his territory. The flag on his strangely shaped fin attracts prey. On the bow is the shock absorber, which was never needed. Many years ago, at the launching party, Sir Hubert stood here, with his wife Suzanne and Jean-Jules Verne. Nautilus's name is now almost covered by moss-like bryozoans, red algae, and other marine creatures. The big ice drill is well preserved. In an emergency, it would have been used to carve an escape route. This thin ice drill allowed the crew to regulate Nautilus's air supply under the ice. Now crustaceans graze on it. The wooden deck rotted away long ago. So far, the researchers have found no evidence of sabotage. They are particularly keen to examine the stern of the submarine. This is where the hydroplanes were before their mysterious disappearance. Was Nautilus's steering gear deliberately damaged? Is the sabotage theory true? But the scientists can't reach the rudder. The stern is buried deep in the sediment. Their submersible can go no further, so, like Sir Hubert, they must finish their expedition early. A salvage vessel equipped with an ROV, a remotely operated vehicle called Argus, comes to help. Fortunately, the team has a detailed construction plan of the Nautilus. This allows them to work out exactly where they should dig in the silt. The ROV operator is Halvor Morn.
Very strong built.
Argus starts its dive. Command sent down this umbilical cable, guide it into the depths. A special suction pump will excavate the silt around the Nautilus's stern. Once it's clear, the scientists can examine the crucial mounting points to which the hydroplanes were once attached. They wait for evidence. Will it prove that the diving rudders were deliberately sabotaged? A video camera sends images up to the control room on the mothership. These show that several cubic meters of silt must be excavated. This will take time. The researchers wait anxiously. Clouds of silt make it difficult to see. Argus's pumps are at full power, but can't dig deep enough. Once more, the team has to abandon their search. Back in Bergen, they talk to the Norwegian Navy's most senior submarine technical officer.
It's very likely that if the Nautilus had been plowing through very dense ice with small icebergs lying all the way along, the supports, which seems to be very thin, might have been damaged or bent inwards, and then the whole thing could have been started.
Whether it was sabotage or not, the essential thing is that Nautilus had lost her diving rudders, used to regulate dive depth, so she couldn't dive safely under the ice. It would have been suicidal. Crew, scientists, Wilkins, all would have been lost, but they all came back alive. That in itself is a great achievement. Sir Hubert himself never joined in the speculation about sabotage. Even in old age, he still dreamed of making another submarine expedition to the North Pole. In October 1958, he met James Calvert, captain of the nuclear submarine Skate. Wilkins suggested that he should take his boat to the pole in midwinter. Sadly, just 6 weeks after this photograph was taken, Sir Hubert died, aged 70. Although Wilkins' expedition failed to hit the headlines and was soon forgotten, it did make a major contribution to our understanding of the Arctic. And he was right. Submarines could reach the North Pole. Captain Calvert uses this historic moment to thank his hero, Sir Hubert Wilkins. On this day, we pay tribute to one of the great men of our century. He spent his life in the noblest of callings, the attempt to broaden the horizons of the mind of man. The captain has brought his friend's ashes with him. At last Sir Hubert's dream comes true. He has reached the North Pole.